Okay, let's continue this passage here. So, in question number 14, as used in line 6, embraced most nearly means. So again, we know the strategy here is that we do not look at the answer choices. We go to where embraced is said in line 6. Over here in line 6, embraced, let's see here, others have accepted the ethical critique and embraced. There we go. And embraced. So, we are right there. Let me blow this up a little bit. Let's see if I can blow it up. I can. Let me recircle embrace. Okay. So we're going to replace the word embraced with our own word. So others have accepted the ethical critique and embraced corporate social responsibility. Okay, so what would be a good word for it instead of embraced? Well, others have accepted the ethical critique and maybe encouraged corporate social responsibility. Let's see how that works. My answer choices are lovingly held. No, that's more romantic. Readily adopt, possibly. Eagerly hugged, again, that's physical or more romantic. Reluctantly used, that doesn't even make any sense. Okay, so the only one that makes sense is readily adopt. That is your answer. Okay, what they're doing here with this word is they're trying to make you think about things in regard to how most people use the word embrace. So most times when people say like, oh, the couple embraced, or the mother and the son embraced during their birthday or whatever. Okay, so you got to use the word in the context of the situation, not in the context of how you're thinking of the word typically. All right, on the next one, number 15. The main purpose of the fifth paragraph, 45 through 56. So we're going to go to 45 through 56. Let me shrink this up a little bit. 45 through 56 is right here. Let's erase that. So we are right here, 45 through 56. The question is the main purpose. So what is the main purpose? Let's read. There is yet another approach. Instead of rooting ethics in character or the consequence of actions, we can focus on the actions themselves. From the perspective, some things are right, some wrong. We should buy fair trade goods. We shouldn't tell lies in advertisements. Ethics becomes a list of commandments and catalogs of do's and don'ts. When a finance official refuses to devalue a currency because they have promised not to, they are defining ethics this way. According to this approach, devaluation can still be bad, even if it would make everybody better off. All right, the key in reading this is actually the first line. There is yet another approach. There is yet another approach means what? There is yet another approach. He's listing ways of doing things, and so we're talking about yet another way of doing it. So, let's see here. The main purpose of the fifth paragraph is to develop a counter-argument, provide support for ideas, describe a third approach, illustrate that one's actions are a result of one's character. Okay, so the opening line, literally the opening line, there is yet another approach, is he saying he's listing a third way of doing it. The rest of the paragraph is describing the third way, but he's just listing the third way of doing it. On to number 16. As used in line 58, clashes most nearly mean. So I'm going to go to line 58. Line 58 right here, clashes. Many moral dilemmas arise when these three versions pull in different directions, but clashes are not inevitable. Okay, so we got to remember, let's do some context. We know from the previous paragraph, from the previous question, that they're listing ways of describing ethics. We may not know all the ways that they've described because I haven't read the entire essay, but I know that there's different ways of thinking about ethics, right? Here it's saying many moral dilemmas arise when these three versions pull in different direction, but clashes are not inevitable. So what it's saying is that you may have one method, you may have one form of ethics that pulls you in one direction, and another form of ethics that pulls you in the opposite direction. So in other words, one form of ethics may say, yeah, it's okay to do that, and another form says it's not okay. And saying, well, that happens, but clashes, these problems, literally the word that pops in my head is conflicts, are not inevitable. So which word means problems or conflicts? Well, conflict. And there's our answer. On to number 17. Which choice best supports the author's claim that there is common ground shared by the different approaches to ethics described in the passage? Okay, so we're going to go to which supports the claim that there is common ground. So we're looking for common ground. Now, let me go through these. All right, so 11 through 12. 11 through 12. 11. Where's 11? Okay, let me erase this. All right, cool beans. 11 through 12. Okay, there are different views on where ethics should apply when someone makes an economic decision. Okay, does that claim common grounds? I don't think so. 47 through 50. 47 through 50. From this perspective, some things are right, some wrong. We should buy fair trade goods. We shouldn't tell lies in advertisements. So let's think about this. From this, some things are good, right, and some wrong. This is asking you to find common ground. 4750 is talking about how there's not common ground. Let's look at 59 through 64. 59 through 64. Many moral dilemmas arise when three versions pull in different, but clashes are not inevitable. So this is pulling from what we did from the previous question, right? Saying that they're not always conflict. Take trade coffee. I'm going to skip some of this and work. For example, buying it might have good consequences, be virtuous, also be in the right act, a flawed one. Common ground like this suggests that even without agreements, ethical economics is still possible. So I think I went a little bit further than I should because it said the 64, but did I go? Yeah, I went a little bit further, but this line right here, I mean, even in the previous question right here, when it says clashes are not inevitable, that right there is exactly where we're trying to find common ground. And this is the example of common ground. Consequences, be virtuous, and always be the right way to act in a flawed market. In other words, these are just different good consequences, virtuous, and right ways are different ethical systems in place, right? And henceforth, the answer there, C makes sense. Okay, but we'll check D just to make sure, 77, 75, 77. We behave like a herd. We fear losses more than we hope for gains. Rarely can our brains process all the relevant facts. This is talking about psychology. This isn't even related to what the question is asking you about. So the correct answer there is C. All right, on to number 18. The main idea of the final paragraph is that, okay, so let's go look at the last paragraph. Okay. These human quirks mean, here's the last paragraph right here. These human quirks mean we can never make purely rational decisions. A new wave of behavioral economics aided by neuroscientists is trying to understand our psychology, both alone and in groups, so they can anticipate our decisions in the marketplace more accurately. But psychology can also help us understand why we react in disgust at economic injustice or accept a moral law as universal, which means that the relatively new science of human behavior might also define ethics for us. Ethical economics would then emerge from one of the least likely places, economists themselves. Okay, so this seems like it's talking about that the merging of psychology with economics, right? The main idea is merging of science with economics with psychology. And if you look at the answer choices, that's what C is exactly saying. Understanding human psychology may help to define ethics. There's your answer. If you read the other ones, answer choice A, human quirks make it difficult to predict people's ethical decisions. People universally react with disgust when faced with economic injustice, and economists themselves will be responsible for reforming the free market. There are mentions of this in the paragraphs. The reason why it's incorrect, they're not the answer. This is a question that's talking about the forest, right? versus the trees. Okay, and all of A, B, and C are trees, but the big point, the forest in this, is answer choice C. That's the big idea. The question's asking for what the big idea is. Okay, moving on to question number 19. Okay, so this is where the chart questions, I think, start to emerge. And with chart questions, they're actually not too difficult. You just got to make sure when you look at your chart, so you got to make sure that when you're looking at the graphs, you understand what the title is saying. The title is saying, you got to understand title. You got to understand what it's talking about. Regular coffee profits compared to fair trade coffee profits, right? You got to understand your X and your Y axis, or your Y and your X axis. So we know that this is going across, left and right, we're going by year, up and down, we're talking about amount of profit, right? You also got to realize that the dash and circles refer to fair trade, and the solid dots and the solid line is regular coffee. Okay, erase this. My font is too thick, so we can look at that. Actually, why don't I do this? Why don't I blow it up as well, because we're going to be looking at this a lot. So again, want to emphasize, you got to look at the title, you got to look at your axes, and you also want to make sure you check your key so you know what it's talking about. All right, so let's look at the question. Data in the graph of per pound coffee profits in Tanzania most strongly supports which of the following statements? So what do I notice? I notice that fair trade is up here at somewhere around 130 for profits. Most of the profits of regular is somewhere around 40. So we can see that fair trade is a lot more profitable than regular. Let's see what answer choice A says. Fair trade coffee consistently earns greater than profits. That's pretty much it. In fact, if you look at B, the profits earned from regular did not fluctuate. If we look at that, it dips, it goes up, and so it does fluctuate. It's fair trade that doesn't. They're trying to confuse you by see if you're reading the chart. Fair trade coffee profits increased between 2004 and 2006. We know 2004, 2006, there seems to be an increase in regular coffee, but fair trade seems about even. Again, I'm seeing if you're paying attention to the key. And last one, fair trade and regular coffee were earning equal profits by 2008. Well, if they were equal, they would be the same line, and they're clearly not. So B, C, and D are wrong. On to question number 20. Data in the graph indicates that the greatest difference per pound profits from fair trade coffee and those from regular coffee occurred during which period? Okay, so when was there the greatest difference? Let me erase this. The greatest difference occurs where the greatest gap occurs, right? The greatest gap is here, somewhere around here. Okay, so somewhere between 2002, 2004, that is answer choice B. All right, one more question. Data in the graph provides most direct support for which idea in the passage? So I think this is actually a pretty difficult question. What the data in the chart makes you think, especially based off of the questions we answered, is that fair trade is more profitable than regular, right? There's actually something else that we looked at earlier in this question right here. When it actually talks about, I'll do it in light blue if I can. Okay, if we look here, it says take fair trade coffee. So they talked about fair trade coffee, right? And what did they say? It can be good, it can be virtuous, and it can be in a flawed market. So one thing you want to do is, if I'm seeing a question like this, one of the rules we talked about before is to skim. Look maybe in the passage, you're going to have to use the idea from the passage and in the chart or the graph or whatever they give you to find the final answer. And there it says it's possible. You can make it work, right? They also mention here in the chart, right? It is fair, right? So it's ethical, right? So let's look at the answer choices. Acting on empathy can be counterproductive. It has nothing to do with that. Ethical economics is defined by character. That is going through earlier in the passage where they list different types of of ethical behavior, but that's not what that's about. Ethical economics is still possible. It's a yes, fair trade is possible. People fear losses more than they hope for gains. That has nothing to do with what we're talking about. C is the answer. All right, hopefully this makes sense. Sorry I had to go quickly through it. I was fighting the bullet on this and trying to finish all of this within a lot of time. All right, guys, see you in the next video.